Hello and welcome to the quarterfinals of Grand Prix Brussels, and we have quite the match for you here. Jeremy Desani on Esper Control, Guillaume Wafotapa on Esper Control. These two, they both have very similar lists and a huge amount of experience in the game. This is going to be a really interesting game, and I'm intrigued to get your idea, Raf, in terms of how you anticipate this game playing out.
Honestly, I don't really know. One player will get ahead on the board with Teferi, and things will go rolling from there on. But first, they have to get their Teferi on the board. That's going to be the first battle.
Yeah, I mean, typically speaking, when we're talking about control mirrors, step one, get lots of lands in play. Each of these players seem to have made their way through the first few turns, achieving that. And Jeremy Desani here, he's got 4 mana up. He's passed the turn without he using any of it, but he is going to have the opportunity here to cast End of Turn Glimmer of Genius. This is the first place where potentially he could get it ahead, and Guillaume Wafotapa simply allowing the card drawing to resolve.
You can't really counter a Glimmer at the end of your turn, because next turn it's 5 mana, and 5 mana is Teferi. So if you tap out on your turn, at the end of your turn, you're exposed to a 5th turn Teferi. The first step is going to play as many lands as possible, just like the good old control mirror. Just how they always went. The more lands you have, the more spells you can play at the end of your opponent's turn. If you're stuck on lands, it's likely you're gonna fall behind.
So a tap land on turn 5, and now we see the Glimmer of Genius coming from Guillaume Wafotapa. And for exactly the same set of reasons, that one ends up resolving. So
from then on, they are not going to miss a lot of land drops. I mean, both of them resolving Glimmer of Genius.
Now, in this game one, obviously these players, they've got a few cards in their main deck that are set up for particular matchups. How many dead cards are there that these players are really going to be hoping not to draw in game one?
I think it's only Fatal Push. Fatal Push is not useful at all. There's no target. Cast down, you can't kill Torrential Gearhulk, so that's relevant.
It looks like both these players do have at least one Fatal Push in their hands here. But more importantly for now, they are hitting land drops. It looks like, all right, shots fired. Search for Azcanta being played here by Guillaume Wafotapa. This a great way of improving his draws in the future, and at some point also potentially getting a little bit of a mana advantage in addition to having some card selection.
So that's the other way to get ahead on the board. If you can't play Teferi, you try to flip in a Search for Azcanta.
So Search for Azcanta has resolved. Jeremy Desani using another copy of Glimmer of Genius here to improve his draws somewhat. Lots of energy available to both these players, though this is not really a matchup where I anticipate a huge amount of that being used.
So you can see the experience here, because Jeremy could have tried to counter the Search for Azcanta, but for a reason he knows, because he probably played the mirror more than we did, he decided not to counter and keep the counter for something more important.
Yeah, each of these players, considering that they're playing control decks, for now choosing not to get in any fights whatsoever. Guillaume elects to put Censor into the graveyard there and finds Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. He does not have a land though for this turn by the looks of things, and it looks like he's looking to move to his discard step. Just throws away a useless Fatal Push.
Well, that's huge for Jeremy here. Being able to get ahead on the board with the lands. Enjoying another cheap counter, because Negate is a cheap counter in this particular matchup, and something you want to see.
So Jeremy's setting up for a turn next turn where he's going to have 8 lands in play, and he could think about trying to resolve something big because he's got a fair amount of counter magic.
Land number 6. Jeremy has land number 8 in hand.
I mean, if you're looking to resolve Teferi here, if you've only got 1 in hand, how much counter magic do you have to assume you're going to need?
I think you first need to play something at the end of the opponent's turn, like bait him a little bit. And if you have Azcanta in play, if you have the actual the Sunken Ruins in play, then fuel your hand with more counters. I don't know, maybe 1 or 2. Or 3 counters.
As things
As
stand
many as
here,
possible.
the first issue that Guillaume Wafutapa facing is hitting all these land drops. It looks like he may again be having to discard sometime relatively soon. Another fatal push going away. At least he's not having to discard kind of real cards in this matchup, but that only a small comfort for the French Hall of Famer.
The good thing I would say about discarding is that you fill your graveyard with to be able to flip Search for Ascanta.
If we look at Jeremy Desani's hand right now, he has 3 disallows, a negate.
Syncopate.
Yeah,
Or
I
two
mean, Randy
syncopates.
Bueller would be proud of this sort of a hand here.
Just missing a Whisper of the Muse.
Oh wow, Whisper of the Muse would be fantastic in this
that
situation.
was Randy's way to draw cards and forbids. And there's only 1 Field of Ruins in each of these decks. So if Search for Ascanta ends up flipping and ends up transforming,
It'll stay around for a while.
it would stay around for a while, unless they draw their Field of Ruins.
So Guillaume, pretty quick to put that Hieroglyphic Illumination in the graveyard. Finds a land for his trouble. That was definitely worth it.
Land number 7.
It's interesting. I was talking to Frank Carsten about how long he anticipated this game going, and he said, you know what, it could be pretty quick because most of the turns don't have a huge amount of action in them.
This is one action scene. For all the fireworks, all the budget for the CGI.
Yep, they just need to have that one over-the-top firefight. So a Syncopate being played on this Torrential Gear Hulk.
Yeah, the rest could just be acted. You know, you don't need that much budget for the
Negate
the
on
rest.
Syncopate. And Torrential Gear Hulk, kind of the ideal card to play at end of turn to start a fight.
Yeah, because it's a threat as well. If you have a 5/6 and 5 counters to back it up, it's pretty good.
All right.
And now look at what happened. So in this counter battle, Jeremy lost his Gear Hulk, lost a counter spell, but also Guillaume filled his graveyard with more spells.
Yeah, he's going to be the first one to transform his Search for Ascanta into Ascanta the Sunken Ruin, successfully discovering the Sunken Ruin.
Jeremy's not far behind.
No.
I mean, it's right around the corner. The second ruin.
Yeah, he can see the signpost. He's just finding somewhere to
Oh,
park.
look at this.
Field of
He drew
Ruin
the Field
right
of
on
Ruins.
time.
Wow.
A huge draw there for Desani. So just one activation of Ascanta the Sunken Ruin. Now these players will have had access to deck lists, so in case they weren't sure exactly how this game was going to go, they have had a chance to scope that out just a little bit.
So Jeremy decides to let Guillaume draw his cards, so maybe allowing him to find a disallow. So maybe he could have destroyed it in response.
Yeah, currently haven't seen any copies of Disallow from either player. Literally shows the Disallow, and that now meaning that if Wafutapa wants to keep his Ascanta around, he has the facility to do so. But in so doing, he will leave the shields fully down, and each of these players have been drawing a lot of cards.
Yeah, but that's not so bad because it's still Jeremy's end of turn. Actually, it's good that it's pretty good for Guillaume to do that at the end of Jeremy's turn. Because now he can play Teferi and have, if he has some counters back up, protected.
So Syncopate there on the Disallow, meaning that Field of Ruin was ultimately successful for Jeremy Desani.
Now it's going to be Teferi time.
Now it's not as if Teferi in play is 100% always going to close this game out. These guys do have copies of Vraska's Contempt, but again, that's another spell that you need to resolve.
I mean, if you manage to resolve Teferi, the extra card is going to be huge. Does Guillaume have extra counters in his hand? He has he has 2 disallows, but only 1 would work.
All right, fireworks. This is Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. one of the most important, if not the most important cards at every stage of this matchup.
The bad guy arrives.
Or the good guy. He's a hero. It says right there on the card. It depends which side of the table.
No, but that's when the action starts. I mean, it's the only good guys. There's no action. There needs to be a bad guy.
Disallow meets disallow.
I'm not saying Guillaume is the bad guy. I'm saying Teferi is the bad guy. He's gonna be the bad guy when Jeremy plays it too.
Fair enough. And here we see Teferi getting rid of that search for Ascanter, at least for now. One loyalty, not so much of a problem in this matchup as it might be in others.
Does Jeremy have a Rasis contempt? Yes, he does.
So that first Teferi, pretty low impact all told.
Minimal impact.
And Dazani still with enough mana that he can potentially fight another copy of the Planeswalker if it comes along.
We've seen that Guillaume has another disallow in hand.
So after that first sort of flurry of action, we may see these players having to reload a little bit. Not on mana, they're all set on that, but just on cards. There's a Torrential Gearhulk that Guillaume can deploy at some point here.
Guillaume decided to not play his fetid pools.
Cycles into another land here. Is decking something that these players need to keep in mind in this matchup?
Oh yeah, definitely, because there are not a lot of win conditions. But if one of the players manages to have a Teferi in play, that stops the decking plan.
Stops the decking, yeah. So Glimmer of Genius now coming from Dazani once more.
Yeah, there are 7 win conditions in each of these decks. Teferi being one of the 3. One of the 7, sorry. 3 Teferis being 3 of the 7.
There we go. Teferi and Torrential Gearhulk, we've seen one of each played by each of these players thus far. And Glimmer of Genius, quick to leave one on the top, put one on the bottom there. Jeremy.
Yeah, Search for Ascanta is coming back.
Now, how much of a fight is it worth it getting in over Search for Ascanta in this matchup?
I mean, it's a very good card in this match, so if you play in sorcery, then your opponent will fight for it, because there's not much else is coming down, and then you have your whole turn to do stuff.
So disallow targets Search for Ascanta, then a disallow targets disallow. Is this stack going to get any bigger? Jeremy still has more counter magic, so he's ready to fight. Though he only has the mana to play one more counter spell.
Does Guillaume want to play Gearhulk here to that's a nice bait.
So this Glimmer of Genius suggesting that maybe Wafo is out of counter magic.
But he might have one. And that's the perfect timing to put Jeremy in the tank.
Yeah, Jeremy needs to think pretty carefully about what's going on here. Currently, he's winning the counter war.
As the game advances, Syncopate is going to be much, much harder to play.
Yeah, and that part of the reason that we saw the Syncopates being played early here by Wafo successfully resolved 2 of them early doors in this game.
Did Frank mention this match when it was going to be quick?
I think that his suggestion wasn't that it was going to be quick, but that
it could go quick.
It wasn't going to be as slow as one might first think, considering how slow control can be in other circumstances.
Well, I think that person might be wrong.
I mean, we weren't going to be able to look away from this one.
Well, this is interesting. There's so many interactions, so many, like that play was I think that play was great.
Absolutely, and it looks like this Glimmer of Genius is resolving here. Wafo now needs to decide how he feels about the 2 cards on the top of his deck, because there is a Scry 2 before any card drawing is involved.
Because in the end, there are not that many counters in the decks. It's only 4 disallows. Guillaume has 4 disallows, 1 censor, 2 essence scatters, but irrelevant here, 1 negate, and 3 syncopates. So it's pretty much only 5 hard counters.
And a lot of these counters being worked through here. A cycle there from Guillaume. All right, so now Wafo hitting all those land drops.
Yeah, Guillaume has doesn't have much action against Jeremy's soul counter. Jeremy's disallow is going to get rid of anything Guillaume is going to play, which is his 1 Gear Hulk. And then he's going to be able to flip the Escanta and then find more business spells.
Yeah, the timely draw of a Field of Ruin by Jeremy Desani.
That was great.
Gigantic in this first game here. We are playing best of 3 in this matchup. Rich Hagen, in his talking to me about this match before we go, said, this is amazing, this is perfect, apart from the fact that because we're not at a Pro Tour, it's only best of 3. Someone likes their control mirrors. Hopefully you guys at home do too, because these guys putting on a show here. Here comes Torrential Gear Hulk.
So what do you do here? Do you counter or do you let it resolve? Because this is in the graveyard. There's no way to actually deal with the Search for Escanta. So he might just let it resolve.
Yeah, this is functionally a big body attached to a card drawing spell, and Desani taking the opportunity to use the disallow in his hand.
He says enough Glimmer of Genius. I'll let 2 minutes resolve already. And here we go. The Search for Escanta is going to transform into the second ruins.
All right, so at this point, each player's hand a little bit depleted, one would think, but still more disallows from Jeremy Desani here, and he's got Escanta to help him refuel.
And he just drew the 4th disallow.
Yeah, if you're Guillaume Wafo at this point, I mean, each of these players, I would imagine, has a little mental checklist of how many counter spells have already been used.
So flavor-wise, what happened? Guillaume played the Escanta. Guillaume found Escanta, the second ruin, and then it was covered by a Field of Ruins, and then he just left. Guillaume left, and Jeremy found the ruins that have been flooded again.
Yeah, double sunken ruin.
Yes.
Fatal push, all that was in the sunken ruin thus far. Not terribly exciting. So Teferi the pickup now for Guillaume.
Yeah, Guillaume needs to draw like a lot of good cards in a row because Jeremy is not going to stop here.
We can see Desani there just organizing his lands a little bit. And Guillaume elects not to go for the Planeswalker just yet.
He has a Rascal's Contempt already, so he doesn't really need another one. Maybe Glimmer of Genius is better here. At some point, he will have seen his whole deck. So he might know in which order all the cards are. Which is something you could actually do after the Field of Ruins. And every time you activate Escanta, every time you scry bottom, you should be able to remember. In the perfect world, you should remember which card comes at what time.
If Jeremy Desani is a Magic playing robot with a big enough hard drive, he will be able to remember everything that's going on with every card in his deck. Right now, all I remember is that thus far we've not seen any copies of Teferi from Jeremy Desani, so they're all still hiding somewhere in his deck. Lots of fatal pushes in that hand, so even though there's a lot of cards there, he's just having to discard one of them, and that could in turn be the story for a few turns yet.
Jeremy could also just write down everything he scries bottom.
He could do that, but there's still a Field of Ruin from Guillaume Wafo at some point.
Well, I think he's going to see there's only one Fields of Ruin. So 4x4, considering there are maybe 30 cards. So it's maybe 10 turns, 8 turns. He sees the whole deck.
Yeah. Cast down the pickup there off Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. I mean, are we hitting a point where Jeremy Desani has enough pieces of removal that he can deal with every threat in Guillaume Wafatapa's deck?
I think he's going to start to place his Gear Hulks as soon as he has too many cards in hand, because he doesn't want to discard active spells. At this point, you don't want to discard Restless Contempt, you don't want to discard counter spells, and you don't have any land to play. So might as well exhaust your opponent's resources.
Desani here. A lot of cards in hand, but he will still be activating this Azcanta, I would imagine.
Oh, he might play the Gearhulk this turn. I mean, how do you improve your hand from there? Like, if you want to win this game, you have to move, you have to do something, and you're so much ahead now.
So here comes the Gearhulk.
And he's happy to trade his Gearhulk for a counter at this stage.
He would only have been discarding something anyway.
Yeah. But since Guillaume does not have a counter, doesn't currently have a counter in hand, he's happy to play Glimmer and trade for a Restless Contempt. That clears the way for a future Teferi, or future Gearhulk.
So we are going to see a resolved Torrential Gearhulk generating a Glimmer of Genius. Before that Glimmer resolves, we see our first Vraska's Contempt for a good while.
I think it's okay. I think we'll let that resolve.
Yeah, while Jeremy does have access to a couple of counter spells here, the Syncopate's going to be a difficult one to leverage for the rest of this game.
Oh, wow.
There were the Teferis. They were there all along.
The bros. Teferi bros.
The twins.
Side by side in the deck. So do you want to Azcanta here? Nope.
Yeah, being able to do all of that at the end of your opponent's turn, not the worst position to be in.
I wonder why Guillaume did not Essence Scatter the Torrential Gearhulk.
Yeah, it's literally the only target in this game one. Meanwhile, here's another great target for Vraska's Contempt.
But again, it's a 2 for 1. The Gearhulk was a 1 for 3.
Yes.
This one would be a 2 for 1. Meaning that the Gearhulk traded for 2 cards in the hand plus the Vraska's Contempt.
There's Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. We will find out how long this copy is going to stay in play as Vraska's Contempt pointed in his direction. And once you have 2 copies of Teferi in play, do you just let this resolve?
No, you mean one play, one hand?
Yes, that means, sorry, yes.
You could. The thing is now is that Jeremy only has access to 2 counter spells and not at the same time. Meaning that he could disallow now and tap 2 lands and have access to Torrential Gearhulk. I see and now understand why Guillaume kept the Essence Scatter. It's to win a future counter war, because Essence Scatter at that point would just counter a Glimmer. Later, if Jeremy wants to counter something, since he played his 4 disallows, he will have to play a Torrential Gearhulk, and that way Guillaume can just counter the Gearhulk to allow one of his spells to resolve.
Super long-term planning, but when you've got a game that is likely to go as long as this one has, that sort of planning really does pay off.
A lesson every turn in this match. So if you don't know how to play a mirror, a control mirror, this is the This is what you have to watch.
All right, we have potentially Teferi on both sides of the battlefield here. Now, who would that favour, assuming that this Teferi resolved?
Since Jeremy has another one in hand, I would say Jeremy. But Guillaume also has a Restless Contempt in hand. It's hard to say. Jeremy has more cards in hand. I don't think I would fight over that Teferi if I was Jeremy. I would just...
So in response to the +1, we see Vraska's Contempt coming from Dzani.
Yeah, the counter is too important here. Well, the Gearhulk 4 counter spell is too important here. So Guillaume only used it to draw a card. Oh, Guillaume has also another Teferi in hand.
I think that might be what he just picked up.
He's Teferi number...
I think each of these...
Is it Teferi number 3 for Guillaume?
Yes. So this is a little dangerous.
Wow, so this is Guillaume's last Teferi. We could be witnessing the game where none of these players have any win conditions at the end. It's going to be about decking.
In which case, the fact that Guillaume Wefotapa only got one activation off on his Azcanta may actually prove to be to his advantage.
Also, you check the energy. Jeremy played 4 Glimmer of Genius, while Guillaume only played 2. So Jeremy's deck is thinner than Guillaume's. But we'll get to that point. I don't think we'll get to that point because Jeremy has more resources, and I believe one of his threads is going to stick. But this is not impossible.
All right, so here's Vraska's Contempt targeting Teferi. I feel like I'm a stuck record at this point. Somehow we're in Groundhog Day, where the lead actor is no longer Bill Murray. It turns out to be Teferi just waking up and hearing that Cher song. That
I got you, babe.
Every single time. I mean, that's my favorite movie, and this is,
it's pretty good.
You know what?
I saw it a couple months ago. I saw it again.
Love it. All right, so you're Jeremy Dzani. You can see that there's been 2 Vraska's Contempts played on both sides. There's been a whole bunch of Teferis played by Guillaume Wafotapa. Jeremy still has access to more Teferi.
Yeah, and Guillaume's hand is pretty slim here. He has 1 Essence Scatter and 1 Fatal Push. Fatal Push doesn't do anything, as we stated earlier. And now Guillaume does not have a Teferi in his deck to win anymore.
He's relying on Torrential Gearhulk and the fact that we believe that he's got more cards left in his deck than his opponent. The secret extra win condition.
This is not going to be easy for Guillaume. Another Fatal Push. This is just as good as an Ace of Spade.
Yep.
Or
Mr. Bun the Baker.
Yeah.
There's an argument to say that if Mr. Bun the Baker's a creature, it might actually be more use to him than Fatal Push right now.
Actually, they could be used for Fatal Push.
Yeah?
If there's a Gearhulk, you can still play it from your hand. And then just to fill your graveyard for a future, I don't know, search for Azcanta shenanigans.
So Teferi getting picked up there by Jeremy Dzani. He now has 2 copies of the Planeswalker in hand.
And a Link to play. So if he plays a Teferi, there's nothing to stop him from doing that.
Dzani here very carefully surveying what's going on in his opponent's graveyard here, because I mean, at some point this turns into a game of bridge where you're carefully keeping track of suits and cards that have already been played and just trying to make sure that you can best ascertain what is left for your opponent to work with.
Well, except that in that case, you'd have all the information, or most of the information. You know which cards have been played.
So once again, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria coming back, ticking up. And at this point, Guillaume running low on the tank in terms of ways of meaningfully interacting. can see there a whole bunch of players on the railing watching how these quarterfinals are going. We do have 3 other quarterfinals in process that we will potentially be able to bring you some of after this match, depending on how long this match goes. We're still in game 1 here. After sideboarding, these decks get a little bit more different from one another.
I would not be surprised if Guillaume conceded at some point before lethal.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
There's a glimmer of genius, potentially a glimmer of hope. What does he see on the top of his deck here? A Torrential Gearhulk will be handy. Essentially, access to more copies of Vraska's Contempt. And Guillaume just double-checking what has been paid by his opponent here.
There's no Essence Scatter.
Okay, a couple of updates from our other games. Just so you know, Thomas Mechin on Teo Fog is currently tied at 1-1 against the Red-Black Chainwheeler deck in the hands of Panagiotis Papadopoulos. Then we have Alexander Gordon-Brown a game up against Niels Gutierrez von Porat. And finally, we have Arna Huschenbeth with his Esper control list leading 1-0 over the mostly red list of Giordano Fagiolo. And just this last second, we've heard that Alex Gordon-Brown has won his match. So he will be through to the semi-finals against the winner of this one. It will be Esper Control against Sultai Midrange on the bottom half of our bracket here at Grand Prix Brussels. Meanwhile, there's a glimmer of genius being resolved.
He was waiting for you to finish your announcement to draw the cards. I think Torrential Gearhulk is on top and Essence Scatter.
Now, if you're Wafo here, can you afford to wait on this?
No, Wafo has to move now because if it's not now, it's at the end of turn because now Jeremy's drawing too many cards a turn and it's going to be impossible to catch up.
Jeremy doesn't use Azcanta at the end of turn there. Perhaps wary of tapping down a little bit low.
Yeah, he doesn't need to. There's nothing he's looking for. There's nothing that's left in his deck. He has everything he needs. He has the Gearhulks in hand. He used all his disallows. He has a Teferi in play. He just needs to ride it.
Makes sense to me.
And answer pretty much anything Guillaume will do.
Making land drops. Still potentially kind of relevant. Syncopate could still come up here. If it did, it would be a gigantic Syncopate. And look at how thin Desani's deck is at this stage in the game.
Yeah, now it's become like really relevant because, well, at some point, even if you ultimate Teferi, and you don't have enough cards in your deck to take out all your opponent's permanents, well, your ultimate is not. It's not going to be as good. But I believe Jeremy has the resources to actually win this game.
Not getting an exact count here, but my feeling is that it must be that Desani has fewer cards in his deck at the moment.
I mean, at some point, Jeremy will be able to use Teferi on itself.
Yes.
Oh, he didn't use Teferi at all.
Wow. Wary of drawing too many additional cards.
And here comes the Fill of Ruins from Wafo. Huh.
Now, given that Jeremy allowed a full Titan cycle to go by without using Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, how valuable is Field of Ruin here? I guess we might have hit a stage in the game where there's simply no lands to find.
Yeah, it doesn't matter so much anymore. Like, he's not even using his second rune. He's Azcanta. He doesn't have any counter left, I think. Might have another Essence Scatter. Maybe a couple, maybe one or two Vraska's Contempt.
It's a strange game that we find ourselves in here, Raf Levy.
Yeah, not activating Teferi. That's surprising and very and not intuitive at all.
Jeremy just getting the double count on these decks.
So does he have? Does he have less cards than? Does he have more cards than Guillaume?
It's something I think we're going to try and get our life total guys down on the floor to double check for us, as and when these players next count through these libraries. Obviously, from the top down, we can't really see how tall those decks are.
I think you have to fetch.
Yes.
You have to fetch, but you don't have to find.
So the shuffle will definitely happen. The search will happen. Whether or not either of these players actually find a basic land is...
When do you reveal if you have if you found one?
Oh, that's interesting.
Do you reveal at the same time?
These players just having a little read themselves. Not something that comes up as being relevant too terribly often, but right now, every card counts.
Yeah, all fails to find.
Jeremy's like, yeah, there's no basics in here, I promise.
Sorry, couldn't find it.
I had a really good look, I just couldn't find one.
Oh, Jeremy's deck is mostly lands.
Yeah. You heard it here first. If you're playing hide and seek against Jeremy Desani, you're probably doing just fine. He just can't find you. I mean, each of these decks looking fairly slim here.
So what's Guillaume plan here? It's just going to be to win with Gearhulk? Because if that's the case, he's far behind because Jeremy has a lot of ways to deal with them.
Yeah, Essence Scatter is in hand for both these players. Getting Gearhulks down might prove a little fiddly.
So is that the plan? The plan is to just deck?
Now, after sideboarding, things are going to get kind of interesting because Chromium the Mutable is in Jeremy Desani's sideboard, and that a creature that's going to be problematic. This game 1, though.
I think this game 1 is going to finish when all the other quarters...
Well, we're not going to cut away.
Yeah, all the other quarter will be done by the time we finish this game 1. And on 26 life, also, Jeremy has 6 attacks from Gearhulks.
Yeah.
So even if Guillaume has to resolve Torrential Gearhulks, he needs at least 6 on his deck.
Yeah, that's a lot of turns. Yeah, because Guillaume is in a position where he can get decked. He has no more Teferis left to work with. How many times do you see a Planeswalker in play for this many turns not using any of its abilities?
It's just chilling.
It's Jeremy and Desani. Jeremy Desani and Teferi just sort of hanging out, watching what's going on.
The bros.
Stoop sitting and seeing what's occurring. See, Guillaume has figured out that two lines worth of lands is the right way around of doing this in order to be able to fit them all on camera. A lot of double checking of the amount of cards in deck. Worth noting that this game would almost certainly have gone very, very differently if it were a timed round. We are in the top 8 now. These games are untimed.
Discarding Glimmer of Genius. Here comes the other Gearhulk.
And a discard from Waffatappa there.
The thing is, Guillaume also... If Guillaume needs to attack Teferi, Teferi can just move the Torrential Gearhulk back in the deck. But then it would give him another card in his deck. So Teferi is basically worthless at this point. He can just shuffle itself back in the deck if you feel so. If you feel like it.
You know, maybe you will feel like it at some point.
Maybe he wants to hide. You know, we talked about hide and seek.
You know, I wouldn't want to say this lightly, but it feels to me a little bit like Jeremy Desani's Teferi right here is a little bit lazy. He's just been stood on the board, just watching what's going on, just not getting involved.
Nah.
The graveyard's far meatier at this point than the libraries.
Get that guy a drink. He's just chilling there. There's no drink, no waiter coming for him.
Hey, if I don't get one, then Teferi does not get one.
Yeah, Jeremy's deck is mostly land, so he's going to hit a land drop every turn.
And once again, Dazani just checking the number of cards in each of these
It
decks.
hasn't changed. If it's
Guillaume says, well, if you're going to check, I will also check. I mean, I guess that even if we're talking about these players having a lot of experience playing control matchups, this exact circumstance where you get to play a control matchup with no clock is a relatively rare occurrence.
It is indeed.
And it will change lines of play. That there are options that you can go for in the top 8 of a GP or of a Pro Tour that simply aren't feasible within the time constraints in any other round of any other tournament.
So the time has come. Teferi says, "I'm bored here. I'm going away. I'll leave. I'm leaving now. This is too much for me. I'm out of here."
So in principle, Guillaume could remove Teferi in response to this, but presumably also he could just wait until later when Teferi comes back to remove Teferi, depending on the exact library counts here.
So is that the time for Guillaume to move? As we know, the Gearhawks are not going to do anything. The Gearhawk are going to be countered by Essence Scatters. And can Guillaume play all 3 Gearhawks at this time?
Look at the look on Jeremy Tazani's face here. He's just holding his head in his hand saying, all I want to do is shuffle my Planeswalker back into my deck. Is that so much to ask? Glimmer of genius coming from Guillaume, and Jeremy Tazani has never been quicker to allow a card drawing spell to resolve. But Vraska's Contempt, one of the cards that's seen here by Guillaume Wafotapa.
I think that could resolve. I mean, if Jeremy now with the Glimmer of Genius, it's 2 less cards on Guillaume's side, so it's fine. I mean, it achieves the same thing.
Essentially, I guess, yeah.
Unless we don't have the right card count. I mean, if Jeremy played like this the whole game, I'm pretty sure he has more cards in his deck. If we can know the card count, that would be great. We asking, so we nice pickup here from for Guillaume.
And the players have been checking quite a lot, so they already have that information. So it's just going to be a matter of whether or not we can get up to speed with the players. It's just so you know where we're at in terms of the other matches. We already have Alexander Gordon-Brown having won his match, so he'll be playing the winner of this one. And Turbo Fog in the hands of Thomas Michin has defeated Panagiotis Papadopoulos on Red-Black Chain Whirler. So there's just one other match going on, and they're in Game 3 now, Giordano Fagiolo and Arna Huschenbeth. And we've just heard that Jeremy Tazani has 9 cards left in his deck, and we can see only 6 for Wafotapa. And I think that means that Wafotapa...
Yeah. He doesn't have enough turns.
He doesn't have any way of closing this out, even if he's beating in with his copies of Torrential Gearhulk. As you so rightly pointed out, 26 life, he would need multiple copies of the Gearhulk in play and successfully attacking in order to deal enough damage before he runs out of cards.
Like, it's pretty unlikely he has any in play. And even if he does, it's going to be hard for him to attack at all.
Yeah, I mean,
Jeremy has so many ways to deal with a Gearhulk.
He can counter Gearhulks on the way in. If they get in, he can then remove them with the copious amounts of removal
just
in his
block
hand.
with his own.
Yeah, this is going to be... I believe that this game is over, even though technically both these players are still, quote-unquote, playing Magic. That's a discarded Teferi.
Yeah, I don't need Teferi anymore.
He's done his work. Well, there's another Gearhulk. That's something.
Yeah, this match is totally different with the Chromium. I think Chromium was designed to break this match.
Are you suggesting that R&D did not want to see lots of games exactly like this?
Well, there's one in Jeremy's sideboard. There's none in Guillaume's sideboard. So, but there's one Eldest Reborn in Guillaume's sideboard. So that's a way to deal with the Chromium.
Make it get sacrificed, then get it back with Act 3. Woo! I like it. Guillaume in a very strange situation. All right, action stations. Here's a Torrential Gearhulk.
This is the This is the turn. You can't let it. You can't even let it resolve. I mean, well, there's no reason not to counter, not to try to counter, but
Essence Scatter, the ideal counter for this one. It didn't have very many targets, but target acquired now. So you guys know, just so we can get a little bit of a flavour of how some of our other quarterfinals going, we are going to get a little bit of Game 3 of Giordano Fagiolo and Arne Huschenbeth after this game. All right, so Essence Scatter
number 1 dead. That was the main phase. Gearhulk.
Yeah. The giant chorus line of lands that Jeremy Desani has going on. No longer enough space to neatly fit in that extra.
So now Guillaume needs the 2 Gearhulk in play to win this game.
Yeah, he's only got 4 cards left in his deck.
So
Has 26 damage left to deal.
4 attacks. That's a lot of attacks. Oh.
Jeremy draws Teferi. We know what he thinks of that particular Planeswalker at this point.
Now Guillaume with a lot of cards in hand.
What a strange game of Magic the Gathering we find ourselves with here.
No. Wow. No, Guillaume hasn't moved. He has another plan.
He clearly sees something that he can work with here.
This one's easy.
All right. Let's cast some more Gearhulks. Essence Scatter again on this Torrential Gearhulk. We can see just 3 cards left in Wafatapa's library. A few more available to Jeremy Desani. I think he's got 6 cards left. So Jeremy not in any great danger of decking just yet.
He needs both of them on the board. So how many answers does Jeremy have?
Well, he has a Cast Down. He has Vraska's Contempt. He has a Teferi, though he wouldn't particularly want to use that one.
Well, he could. At this point, I think he could.
Yeah, I get
that would give him a... Would that give him a turn? Yeah. No? Yes, it would. Because the Gearhulk would be the last card drawn. And
yeah,
that would
which
that
one
would
is
work.
not a good attacker. I mean, as things stand right now, first up, we need to see what Guillaume's going to do about this Essence Scatter. He plays a Torrential Gearhulk with obviously copious amounts of counter magic in his graveyard. There's a Disallow and a Negate available to Guillaume Wafotapa here. And he's going to need both of them, I would imagine. So this Torrential Gearhulk threatening to counter the Essence Scatter with a card in the graveyard. Some nervous-looking judges here. What sort of a world have they found themselves in watching this match between these two Esper control lists?
So how many counters does Guillaume have access to?
I believe he's got a Negate and a Disallow in hand. And he is going to resolve Torrential Gearhulk. So a Cast Down now being played on one of those Torrential Gearhulks.
Like this Essence Scatter does not have to resolve. As long as one of them dies, Jeremy's safe.
So we have a weird stack going on here. Torrential Gearhulk's resolved, meaning that Disallow has been put on the stack. Cast Down has been targeting the Torrential Gearhulk that has now resolved.
Also very well played here by Jeremy, because now he just has to resolve one of his spells. Either Essence Scatter or Cast Down.
Or indeed the Vraska's Contempt he still has in hand.
So the Cast Down can resolve, and he can play another one. He's going to tap Guillaume out, and then his Syncopate is going to be much more efficient.
And there's still a Torrential Gearhulk in hand for Jeremy Desani.
Yeah.
So now he goes for Vraska's Contempt. Guillaume trying to figure out what the remaining cards could be left in Tazani's hand here. The Essence Scatters are not going to be any good against that Vraska's Contempt. Has to use a Disallow. And Jeremy quick to say, no, this stack is going to get more complicated rather than less, because a lot of mana still available to the Pro Tour Theros winner here. And he does have responses.
So as we see, Guillaume does not have a hard counter for a cast out now. So one of them is going to resolve. That should be enough. He only has counters for Gearhulk. Okay, this one resolves. Cast down. Jeremy suspects Guillaume to have a lot of Essence Scatters in hand. That's why he's not even bothering to play his Gearhulks.
Nice bit of commentary from the rail. Arne Huschenbeth, who's waiting to play his game 3, is like, are they playing Commit to Memory? Because that could be fun.
Oh, yeah, I don't think they do.
They do not, but yeah, the aftermath of Memory would mean that we could potentially be in for an even longer game than we currently find ourselves in.
If Jeremy counters with Syncopate, he is indeed countering the Gearhulk.
So now plays a Gearhulk. That meets an Essence Scatter. And we said that something strange would have to happen for a Syncopate to work out at this stage in the game, but congratulations, we've found ourselves in strange.
So now he has to Syncopate the Gearhulk. Yep. Not this and Scatter, because he can suspect Guillaume to have exactly what he has in hand. He doesn't want to fight for the Gearhulk because Guillaume might have another Essence Scatter.
I feel like this is going to be a conversation that goes on in our coverage group of, has there ever been a more complicated stack on camera?
This is brilliant. I mean, this is brilliantly
poetry.
played. Yeah. And that's it. Guillaume recognizes he cannot win this game.
Wow.
So he did concede without lethal on the stack or anywhere. He was dead in 6 turns. So he was not literally dead, but he was not going to win.
Yeah, there was no way of him winning the game left. He had played every single threat in his deck. Each one of them had been answered in turn with Jeremy Tazani, who still had more cards left in his deck than his opponent. That meaning that we were able to have our game 1 completed there. While these guys shuffling, we're going to jump across and see a little bit of some of our other quarterfinals here. This is Giordano Fagiolo against Arne Huschenbeth. So we still have some Esper control. It just happens to be against what we're referring to as mostly red aggro. It's 1-1 here, so this is their game 3, and a turn 1 Bomat Courier, an early source of damage potentially, but for a fatal push coming from Arne Huschenbeth.
This is the match we've seen a lot this weekend, and that's repeating right now. So this is the last remaining Goblin Chainwhirler deck in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, we had Red-Black Chainwhirler has already been defeated by Thomas Michin, who is on Turbo Fog. So yes, this list, which is a little unusual, it's almost mono-red, but for black mana to activate your ribbons and Scrap Heap Scrounger and counter magic all round from Huschenbeth here, taking control of the early stage of this game. Counter magic plus fatal push, meaning that there's not been a successful attack before the 4th turn here, and that has to be in Esper Control's favor. Getting to the mid to late game with lots of life is exactly where it wants to be. Chandra Torch of Defiance. Is this one going to resolve, though? Planeswalkers, a big threat if they get to hang around, and it looks like that is going to be the case here, immediately ticking up.
I mean, you don't want to keep your negates against red aggro.
2 points of damage from Chandra, the first damage of the game.
So with Arne with only one way to deal with either Chandra or Hazoret, the Hazoret sitting in Giordano's hand might be very good next turn.
Yeah, Vraska's Contempt pretty heavily taxed here, having to be used here on Chandra, of course.
Hazoret's going to do some damage here.
5-point chunks Creatures a little bit easier for the Esper control deck to deal with than Planeswalkers in general terms, but if you're looking for a problematic creature, there are a few more problematic than Hazaret.
Oh man, Hazard not attacking this turn gives Arna a little turn to breathe.
And I guess
But
if you can flash out a Gear Hulk, that will be able to block Hazaret.
Oh, and kill Hazard with Rescue Contempt. Now Arna's actively waiting for a Gear Hulk. I don't know how you can actively wait for something. Maybe by
I don't know.
stomping.
I've definitely been stood around at bus stops from time to time, very actively waiting for my last bus home. Goblin Chainwhirler coming along. Just 2 cards in hand here for Hushenbeth. He interacted 1-for-1 pretty well for a while, but it's the mostly red aggro deck that enjoys having not very many cards in hand here, because that means that Hazaret's able to attack.
Yeah, it's a 2-turn clock here. Not even. Does he have lethal for next turn?
5 points of damage coming on in here.
He might. That's 14. If he fires the lightning strike, 11. 8 from the creatures. Oh wow, he would be sitting on 1 life next turn. So he has 2 turns.
Baral, Master Compliance. All the counter magic will be a little bit better. There is a Fatal Push available to Hushenbeth here.
So if Giordano decides to strike Baral, then the Fatal Push would be online to kill the Chainwhirler.
So Hazaret there just getting activated for 2 points of damage. Can't stop that.
Torrential Gear Hulk still live in this game.
Big swings. Baral gets killed off here, but not for nothing. We're going to get
Fatal Push on
end of
the
turn
Goblin.
Fatal Push on the Goblin. This is still
Teferi would be fine here too. Teferi to return Hazaret. Otherwise, what is it? Is it the land?
We have 2 lands in hand.
That's not gonna do it.
Yeah, I mean, even if that lightning strike was literally anything, 2 activations of Hazaret plus an attack.
2 damage, 7. Attack for 5, down to 2. Arna does not have the Gear Hulk, and I think.
Yeah.
Do you pass the turn here? What do you do? If he has the concept, he would have played it for sure. Maybe just wait for the upkeep just in case.
And you go for the activation on Hazaret here rather than casting the lightning strike, just so that if there's some sort of counter magic, you're still getting the damage through.
Yes.
I mean, it's one of those things. It's pretty narrow. It shouldn't really make too much of a difference. I guess.
No. No upkeep. Nothing. Okay. Well, I guess if there's a Gear Hulk, that doesn't matter so much.
So step 1.
Yeah, that's
doesn't
that's
even
game.
need to attack.
Wow.
All right. So Giordano Fagiolo will be our 3rd semi-finalist. We've got 1 more match to complete, though, and looking at it, now we have Guillaume and Jeremy Tazani. In the time it took for that other semi-final to be completed, they're still figuring out the details of their sideboarding here. They wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be a second of actual gameplay missed of their epic quarterfinals on camera.
Goblin Chainwhirler lives to see another day.
It's Jeremy Tazani and Guillaume Wafotapa just double-checking the final little bits of their sideboarding, and we will get a chance to see everything going on here. Fasten your safety belts, guys. We are in for a ride. And after sideboarding, I have to think that the addition of an Elder Dragon Legend is going to be, hopefully, a big game changer in terms of the speed and overall shape of these post-sideboarding games.
I think it is.
It has to be. If it's not, why is it
this
in the
card,
deck?
this card is just too good. In the mirrors, if you have it and your opponent doesn't, you have such a huge advantage.
Yeah, Chromium the Mutable. It's a creature that cannot be countered. that will take rapid chunks out of your opponent's life total. And if they try and point removal at it, assuming you've got some cards in hand, you can just keep it around.
Much better than the first iteration
Of Chromium?
of Chromium, yeah.
It's taken a long while for Chromium to come back in style.
Yeah, I mean, Chromium. The first Chromium was not great.
Looked cool, though.
It was 7/7 for 8 Esper colors and 2 white, 2 blue, 2 black, 2 colorless. 7/7 flying rampage 3.
A classic ability in Esper.
Yeah, and you had to pay 1 white, 1 black, 1 blue to just to upkeep cost, just to keep it around. Otherwise, it would just go away.
A very needy Shining Dragon, it must be said.
So what's Rampage 3? If you block after the first creature that blocks it, it gets +3/+3.
It's a bit like Bushido 3, except for the fact that the first blocker doesn't do
count.
anything.
Yeah. So if you block with 2 script rights, it becomes 10/10.
Yeah?
But it's not trample, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's essentially very difficult to kill off with multiple blocks. But at the same time...
You just want to block with Lord of the Pit anyway.
Yeah. All right, so our game has begun now. We've got Guillaume Wafo-Tapa with a couple of islands, the classic start. Meanwhile, Jeremy Desani, his mana base a little more colourful as we go into the third turn of this game. Will we see Sensor doing some work here post-sideboard? It's in hand for Wafo and potentially an easy way of him stopping an early threat.
So the question here is, do you want to cycle your lands?
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, that's the question they asked. Both of these players asked themselves. Guillaume has the answer. It's yes.
He picks up more counter magic. Jeremy Zazani having the advantage in a few different ways here. First up, he won that epic game 1.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, he's the one with Chromium the Mutable, which surely will be in his deck after sideboarding here. Hieroglyphic Illuminations played end of turn here by Guillaume Wafo-Tapa. That'll draw him a couple of cards. And finds 2 counter spells. He's in a happy spot in terms of counter magic. Just wants to make sure he continues to hit land drops and finds a land on the top of his deck there, and along with a swamp in hand. So he just needs to plan out when he wants to play these lands that are going to come into play tapped.
Another important fact was that Jeremy played first in game 1. Well, at the end, you're like, oh yeah, but does it matter really? Because, you know, it was Guillaume that was decked in the end. But yes, it did matter a lot. He was the first one to fire his Glimmers of Genius. And the first one to be able to play land every turn. So yes, that was extremely relevant. Guillaume was on the play in this game. So let's see if that's...
All right, a Syncopate on a Glimmer of Genius here. I guess that when you know that your opponent has a card that can simply win the game, it becomes more important to stop the card drawing so that they don't find it as soon.
All right, a Duress on Jeremy's side of the board.
Duress in control mirrors, something that Guillaume Wafo-Tapa very, very familiar with. He has cast more than his fair share of them himself. And good enough that he goes for a negate on this. Are we going to see a small counter war? Nope, it looks like Desani content to let that Duress have taken 1 piece of counter magic out of Wafo-Tapa's hand and pass the turn.
Is he going to fire another Glimmer? That would be a good time for Guillaume to play his...
Play a Gearhulk?
Would it be a good
negate
time?
the Glimmer?
Would it be a good time?
I honestly am not sure.
I don't know either.
It feels to me like if you do that, then you open the door to a Teferi getting resolved on the other side of things.
Yeah, yeah, it would matter at all, actually, because Jeremy has the Teferi and the cast out, so it would just kill the Gearhulk. So no, Gearhulk not a good option. Sensor?
I mean, it's we were wondering whether or not Sensor was going to be able to hit something relevant here. This is Jeremy Desani tapping out.
Will you have another window where Sensor is going to be good? Yeah. It's probably too early to cast your Gearhulks. As we've seen, very, very important.
Walking Ballista in hand here for Jeremy Desani as well. That a card that, when you have access to a lot of mana in the mid to late game, could also prove very important.
I think Jeremy just wanted to have as many win conditions as possible.
I can dig it. After sideboarding, we do want to see a little bit more action than we saw in Game 1. Game 1 was pretty electric in its own way, but at the same time, it was an unusual game, and I don't mind if it stays unusual by this game working out a little differently.
Jeremy might have sideboarded out some syncopates. I mean, he needs a room to put all these cards. So he boards in 1 Walking Ballista, 1 Negate, 2 Jace's Defeat, probably 2 Glint Sleeve Siphoners,
Some amount of duress.
3 Duress, 1 Chromium. That's 10 cards.
Wow. Got to make some space somewhere to do that.
So he kept the cast downs. Well, for Fatal Push, that's the easy one. Does Guillaume have the... He has the Siphoners too, so it's not even that clear that you want all your Fatal Pushes out.
So Essence Scatter does get played on that Walking Ballista. I think I like that. The Walking Ballista has the potential to go a little bit loopy given time and mana.
And I think it's also much better than Fatal Push. I mean, Fatal Push is good against Siphoner, but you want something that's a little better than just a 1-for-1 that will be blanked most of the game if your opponent does not have a Siphoner.
So Wafo a little ahead on lands here. But Desani, a lot of sideboard cards have come up for him already. He's already duressed, he's already cast a Walking Ballista, now he has a Glint Sleeve Siphoner.
Jamming the threats.
He's practically Esper aggro at this point.
Yeah, practically. The famous Esper aggro.
I mean, that's what original Chromium would have been most happy in.
I would say classic Esper aggro.
In as much as we've never seen it before, so this must be classic.
Oh, there was an Esper aggro in Hawaii in Block Constructed.
Yeah, Esper Stoneblade.
Oh yeah, but was that aggro? That was more mid range.
I'm more thinking of the literal card in the deck that was some sort of an Esper Blade chap.
No, there was the actual Esper.
Yes.
Like with the creatures.
Yes.
From Esper, the artifact creatures.
Yes.
From Alara.
Yes.
Esper aggro.
All right, so a glimmer of genius coming from Guillaume Wafo here as he tries to figure out what he wants to do with this Glint Sleeve Siphoner. It might be that we get to see a life total change in a direction other than up in Game 2. New experiences in this particular quarterfinal abound. And the Siphoner does resolve. Even though he's got the land advantage, Wafo here, I hesitate to say that he's in front in this game, where in Game 1, hitting lands when your opponent doesn't is pretty much the ball game.
How good would Teferi be if it was untap 2 lands during your opponent's upkeep instead of at the end of your turn?
It would certainly be different.
It technically doesn't change that much.
I think for the decks casting Nexus of Fate, it changes.
Oh
quite
yeah,
a bit.
it's totally different, but there would be a nerf to
yeah. An alternate universe version of the situation that we find ourselves in this particular standard format. But as things stand, here's a Torrential Gearhulk getting hit by an Essence Scatter, which in turn gets hit by a Negate, meaning the Torrential Gearhulk coming along and another Glimmer of Genius being played by Guillaume Wafo. Wafo in this game seems very keen on making sure that when it comes to numbers of cards, he is well ahead of his opponent. Sees Torrential Gearhulk and Teferi on the top of his deck here from that Glimmer of Genius and elects to draw both of them.
I think that's the effect of the snowball effect from the play first action. The first Glimmer gets you more draw spells, gets you the 6th land, gets you more cards. I think it's what happens.
Okay, so being tapped out, Guillaume Waffatapa leaves a window for Jeremy Desani to resolve his Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Glint Sleeve Siphoner has Menace, so it gets to attack in unimpeded here.
And end step, we're going to see a cast down on Torrential Gearhulk, yes.
I mean, this would be another instance where those lands untapping during
Yeah.
upkeep would be a big deal.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up.
Cast down. Pretty efficient removal spell. Not too many legendary creatures in this matchup, at least. Chromium is legendary, but for a variety of reasons is not too afraid of a cast down.
Who's Mazerua?
I mean, we don't know because he never existed.
Oh, that's so it doesn't really matter then.
Nice little...
He wasn't legendary anyway, so...
I mean, by definition, if he got cast down, couldn't have been. All right. Teferi's on both sides. A disallowed drawn there by Waffatapa.
We're going to see the same trick this time. Yep.
He's a Torrential Gearhulk.
Another Glimmer. Oh yeah, well, two cards. That's about the same thing. Almost.
We've been referring to a lot of these card drawing effects as being like inspiration, but imagine the fact that inspiration targets either player. Would
That's
be
true.
pretty
Oh, wow.
relevant in these sorts of
yeah,
matchups.
you're right. You're right. That's not a strict upgrade.
Yeah, I think there are various moments in game one of this match where if one of these players had inspiration, they might quite happily have targeted their opponent.
So what's your plan here? Do you Gearhulk into cast down to kill your opponent's cast down, minus Teferi into the Teferi and go aggro? Is that the plan? I mean, it sounds good if your opponent is stuck with scanners in hand and tapped out during your turn.
Yeah, make the most of the fact that we've suddenly hit Battlecruiser Magic stage where players are tapping out on their own turns.
Yep, that's the plan. I mean, that's the right plan if you expect your opponent to has a lot of counter spells.
Some Gearhulk on Gearhulk violence there as Torrential Gearhulk gets back, cast down to take out Guillaume Wafatapa's Torrential Gearhulk.
Yeah, I think minusing the Teferi as well is part of the plan. Yep.
Seems like Jeremy Desani agrees. All of a sudden, Guillaume Wafatapa has nothing on his side of the board aside from lands. That meaning that, for now at least, Jeremy Desani, in spite of being quite a bit behind on lands in play, looks a little bit ahead in this game, and indeed, of course, this match.
He's not ahead on cards, but he's ahead on board, and like way ahead at this point.
Yeah.
Because Guillaume is holding the counters, but it's too late. All the threats on the board.
Field of Ruin, kind of irrelevant here. There's not as Counter the Sunken Ruin going on. Mana bases kind of look okay.
There's nothing to stop Teferi from drawing cards. Yeah, this is bad blocker.
I mean, it's a blocker that can only block the Torrential Gearhulk right now.
Okay.
Menace being pretty pertinent on this board.
Guillaume in a pretty bad shape. Last time they met was in the top 8 of PT Dublin that Jeremy won.
Turns out that on Sundays, this matchup goes one way. Everyone's swinging for Desani here. Let's leave Cypher on her own rather, not going to be good enough to take down Teferi.
And one of the cards, oh, look at this bad boy.
Oh, there he is, the big shiny dragon himself.
7/7
Chromium the Mutable.
Rampage 3.
If that was the wording on it, then I don't think that Guillaume Wafotapa would mind quite so much. Chromium the Mutable with a whole bunch of other text far more pertinent to this 2018 metagame.
With other creatures on the board, I don't think Guillaume has any way to deal with Chromium. Eldest Reborn being probably the only way out. And since Jeremy has other creatures or Planeswalker to sacrifice instead of Chromium, I mean, there's no way.
Yeah, Wafotapa, he may just have found himself outdrawn a little bit in game 1, out-sideboarded for game 2, and this was something that these decisions were made before either player sat down at the start of Saturday morning.
Jeremy, 2 times finalist this season. 2 times GP finalist this season.
He's having a great season. Your teammate on Team Connected Company.
Yeah, and at the PT as well.
This has been an epic quarterfinal between these two players. Neither giving an inch.
It's probably the last turn for Guillaume. Chromium is going to be the nail in the coffin. Yep.
And you might as well play that Teferi and at least stop the creatures already on the battlefield being a lethal threat.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I think it resolves. I mean, I don't see a better spell to play than Chromium here. And Guillaume is going to be on 1. That means he won't be able to draw from the Siphoner if he manages to deal with the board.
So many ifs for Guillaume Wafotapa here.
And yeah, 3 counters, Glimmer of Genius, nothing goes to Chromium. The Chromium. And that would be 9 lethal damage here.
Here's Chromium. Chromium the Mutable. Flash. Can't be countered. Flying. 7/7. If that weren't enough, you can always discard a card to turn Chromium into a human with 1/1.
An invisible
Hexproof.
stalker. Turns into an invisible stalker until the
Yeah.
end of turn. Now drawing 3 cards this turn with 2 unblockable creatures and lethal damage.
It's a nice feeling, right?
It's even better when your opponent extends the hand.
Yeah, Guillaume Wafotapa conceded a little bit before there was an actual win on the table in game 1, though he obviously had no way of winning the game left. This time round, he might make Jeremy work for it.
It's not going to be too hard. Just turn the creature side away.
Buff.
Buff. Yes, that's the way. That's the way to go. Buff.
And there is the handshake. Jeremy Dezani wins 2-0 over Guillaume Wafotapa. There's some clips on that one, but you know what? You probably want to watch that one the whole way through. A lot to learn about how to play your control matchups. And unsurprisingly, at the end of that match, which was pretty epic, that's also the end of our quarterfinals. Just give you a quick rundown of how the other quarterfinals went so that you guys can get a feel for what we're going to see for the rest of today. It was Thomas Michin winning with Turbo Fog over Panagiotis Papadopoulos on Red Black Chain Whirler. We got a chance to see Giorgio Fagiolo winning against Arne Huschenbeck, so we will see Giordano against Thomas, Turbo Fog against Mostly Red on the top half of our bracket. Then we had Alexander Gordon-Brown winning with Sultai Midrange against Niels Gutierrez von Porat, who was on Sultai Gift. So it's going to be Sultai Midrange against Jeremy Dezani on Esper Control, the bottom half of our bracket. The semi-finals, they will be with you very soon indeed. It will be Simon Gertzen. It will be... We will have Riley Knight with you right after these messages. Or indeed...
Or not.
Or not.
Or
You know,
not.
maybe we'll just be here for the entire time.
I'm very happy with these decks.
Yeah.
In the semifinals. 4 different decks.
4 different really
I
cool
love it.
decks. It's gonna be.
I like it.
It's going to be a nice set of semi-finals. You can tell that we're almost out of words for our quarterfinals, but do not go anywhere. We'll have more magic for you after these messages. And then, of course, the finals here from Grand Prix Brussels.
Because they're ready.